After transmigrating into this world, the man spent decades and eventually became the Grand Preceptor who ruled over the nation. Yet just as he was ready to enjoy earthly pleasures, two cultivators suddenly appeared in the sky above the palace. They ignored the mortals beneath them and began fighting Midair. The shockwaves they created fell like divine punishment, reducing the royal city to ruins. His dozens of wives, concubines, and children were unable to escape. Yet Li Fan couldn't help bursting into excited laughter. From a very day he became an official, Li Fan had used his authority to search for the immortal realm. He once sent tens of thousands of iron cavalry to the icy northern seas and the vast southern oceans, as well as to the void abyss of the far east and the endless mountains of the far west. He practically searched the entire Great Xian, yet found no trace of immortals. Now, seeing cultivators with his own eyes, Li Fan quickly raised his hand and formed a hand seal, summoning his treasured artifact, Reincarnation. It could transform everything he had truly experienced into simulated illusions, allowing him to return to a predetermined anchor point. In truth, this was already Li Fan's second life in this world. In his first life, knowing nothing about this world, he could only work as a merchant. Later, he became an ordinary wealthy man, married, had children, and lived a plain life. Only when his life neared its end did he awaken the artifact known as Reincarnation. With this artifact, Li Fan was able to rise rapidly in this life and become the Grand Preceptor. However, he could not restart immediately, as there was still something extremely important to accomplish. Now, most of Xinjiang had been destroyed. After Li Fan's trusted guard battalion took over the city, they could speed up reconstruction, and more importantly, allow him to stay in the camp and investigate the two cultivators' whereabouts. Months later, the rebuilt capital slowly regained traces of life. During this time, the spies he sent still could not find the two cultivators. Since that was the case, Li Fan no longer wished to waste time. He immediately activated Reincarnation. As usual, several options appeared before him. One was to retain an item from this life. The second, to retain his cultivation realm. The third, to let someone close to Li Fan keep their memories. And the fourth, to abandon all options to speed up the charging process. After reading them, he chose the fourth option once again. The incarnation into illusion ability of Reincarnation required charging. When Li Fan suffered a fatal blow, the artifact would consume charge to automatically activate a protective shield. In this life, his goal was to learn the secrets of cultivation from the two cultivators. With the experience of 2 lives, everything progressed smoothly. In this imperial examination, Li Fan wrote even better than in his previous life, becoming the champion of all 3 rounds and shocking the entire nation. He then chose to serve in Wen County again. Although the court was puzzled, they still approved Li Fan's request. Because of his great fame and his total understanding of the temperament of every official in the county, he quickly brought Wen County under control and began promoting his own trusted followers. Next, Li Fan found someone who could serve as a stand-in for the king of Langya and cultivated him as a trusted aide. Working together from within and without, they eliminated the king of Langya, with Li Fan taking his place and gaining full control over the Langya royal residence. After that, the wedding between the king of Langya and the Grand Academician's granddaughter was held as scheduled. That night, Li Fan broke into the bridal chamber and had marital relations with the princess consort. The following year, she even bore him a son. A few years later, the emperor finally fell gravely ill. After receiving the imperial edict of succession, Li Fan rushed to the capital with his trusted aides. After Li Fan's puppet, the king of Langya, ascended the throne, Li Fan placed his own people throughout the court. With the secret cooperation of the Grand Academician's granddaughter, he quickly seized control of the entire government. After helping his own son ascend the throne, Li Fan granted himself the title of Grand Preceptor, once again reaching supreme authority. One day, a spy finally reported that they might have discovered the immortal realm. He said that the fog above the void abyss at the far eastern end of the continent would disperse for half a day every 15 years. During that moment, they vaguely saw many magnificent buildings hidden within. Judging from the flourishing lights and smoke, the city likely held over 1 million people. There were also many exotic beasts flying across the sky. Hearing this, Li Fan asked whether they had found a way to descend into the abyss. The spy replied that they had tried all kinds of methods, but none succeeded. Any attempt to descend resulted in them being torn apart by a gust of wind that appeared out of nowhere. Upon hearing this, Li Fan sighed quietly, realizing he would still have to wait for those 2 cultivators to appear over the royal city again. Soon more than 10 years passed, and time reached the day he saw the cultivators in his previous life. The 2 appeared once more, just like before, above the royal city. But this time, just as they were about to make a move, they suddenly noticed many chunks of iron shooting rapidly from within the city. The burly man, named Ko Hong, hurriedly activated a shield to block them. Looking down, he discovered that the chunks of iron all came from the iron tubes held by the mortals on the ground. Ko Hong examined each metal pellet with curiosity, wondering what they were. He then used immortal arts to pull a handful from the mortals to inspect them. After finishing his examination, he said it was a pity. These things only worked in a land where the Tao was broken. Then he looked down and said that these mortals dared to strike at a cultivator like him. With that, he waved his hand and released a fiery dragon shadow toward the ground. In the next second, the fire dragon swept across the entire royal city like a world-ending demon. In the blink of an eye, the royal city was once again reduced to ruins. But when he looked at the ground again, he was stunned by what he saw. Although the buildings had collapsed, not a single mortal below had been harmed. Dao Xuanzi, standing beside him, noticed the anomaly and said that the hidden weapons earlier had been soaked in mortal blood. Hearing this, Ko Hong finally understood. Mortal blood contained a substance called mortal-immortal miasma, which weakened one's power at best and endangered one's life at worst. The 2 quickly realized they had been ambushed and immediately turned to flee. At that moment, Li Fan shouted from afar, "If you 2 escape today, then by tomorrow, news of you obtaining the core formation technique will spread across the entire cultivation world." Dao Xuanzi's heart trembled. Only the 2 of them knew about acquiring that technique. It was impossible for the news to leak. While they hesitated for that instant, dozens more cannon shells shot up from the ground. The shells exploded around them, each filled with mortal blood. Their bodies were corroded and unable to remain airborne. Both men fell from the sky. The surrounding soldiers shouted, "Immortal masters, please do not resist. Our Grand Preceptor orders that if you surrender, your lives will be spared." Just as Dao Xuanzi prepared for a desperate last stand, he noticed a ring flying toward him. Turning back, he realized it came from the dying Ko Hong. Ko Hong urged him to take his storage ring and find a way to escape. With that, Ko Hong breathed his last. Li Fan watched this scene from afar. He couldn't help but sigh at how lethal mortal-immortal miasma was to cultivators. Dao Xuanzi assumed another cultivator was hiding behind the mortals, using the miasma to attack them. Unwilling to accept that he and his brother had fallen to such underhanded methods, he burned his remaining life force, using the heaven and earth pillar as his Tao foundation. Sword, descend. In the next moment, a massive sword, 100 meters wide, fell from the sky. As the giant sword was about to strike the royal city, Li Fan hurriedly activated his artifact again, ending that life and returning to the original anchor point. This time, he planned to win over one of the 2 cultivators first. Thus, in this new life, after seizing control of the court, Li Fan personally arrived above the void abyss. According to his calculations, today was exactly the day the fog dispersed once every 15 years. But when he raised his telescope and clearly saw what lay below, cold sweat instantly ran down his back. There were no magnificent buildings. Everything below had turned to ruins. And on a massive stone wall were 4 blood-red words. "The immortal path is dead." This left Li Fan puzzled. What exactly had changed here? And what had happened to the entire cultivation world? So he waited for decades more, until the day the 2 cultivators reappeared above the royal city. This time, Li Fan ordered his soldiers to fire at Ko Hong and shouted, "Ko Hong, we have awaited you on orders from Immortal Master Dao Xuanzi." Ko Hong blocked the bullets and, realizing they carried immortal miasma, was shocked. He immediately cursed at Dao Xuanzi beside him, calling him despicable. But Dao Xuanzi was even more confused. He couldn't understand why mortals would attack Ko Hong in his name, or why they possessed immortal miasma. He hurried to explain that these mortals were not under his command. Before he could finish, Li Fan shouted again, "Immortal Master Dao Xuanzi, how can you deny it? Did you not promise that once you seized the core formation technique, you would lead my people out of this forsaken place? We provoked countless enemies for your sake. If you do not take us away, my entire clan will perish without burial." These words made the wavering Ko Hong completely certain Dao Xuanzi was betraying him. After all, no one else knew of the technique. Dao Xuanzi realized this couldn't continue, so he used immortal arts to locate the source of the voice. He soon pinpointed it and shot straight toward the ground. Upon landing, he discovered the voice came from a black box. He wondered what kind of artifact it was. Its owner was incredibly cautious. Without hesitation, he blasted the speaker apart with immortal arts. At that moment, Ko Hong arrived in pursuit, shouting, "Dao Xuanzi, we've known each other for 100 years, and this is what you are?" With that, he raised his hand and unleashed the technique Flame Dragon's Fury. A pillar of fire shot toward Dao Xuanzi. Dao Xuanzi refused to sit and wait for death. He summoned his long sword. The sword collided fiercely with the fire pillar. Li Fan shouted again, "Dao Xuanzi is fickle and vindictive. If he wins, none of us will survive." Men, ate Immortal Master Ko Hong. Hearing this, Ko Hong rejoiced. Those who commit evil will meet their end. Dao Xuanzi, even you, once so proud and righteous, have fallen into betrayal. Wrong to the extreme, Dao Xuanzi roared back, "Fool, we're being set up." But Ko Hong refused to listen. He formed a hand seal and unleashed his newly comprehended skill, Dragon Prison. As he spoke, a blazing cage descended from the sky, trapping Dao Xuanzi. Dao Xuanzi quickly formed a counter seal and shattered the cage. With a loud boom, he shot skyward with his longsword. Then he activated his ultimate technique, summoning the colossal sword once more. Ko Hong showed no intention of retreating. He had long wanted to test his power against that technique. As the two ultimate moves were about to collide, Li Fan ordered his men to fire a volley at Dao Xuanzi. The bullets burst, surrounding him with immortal miasma. His spiritual power collapsed instantly, and he was struck head-on by Ko Hong's Dragon Prison. Before he could react, the flaming branches split apart and tore Dao Xuanzi to pieces. The giant sword in the sky shattered into fragments. When Ko Hong landed, Li Fan hurried forward to greet him and begged him to save his people. Ko Hong turned and asked whether the voice from all directions had been Li Fan's doing, saying that a mere mortal dared interfere in a battle between cultivators. Li Fan replied that he was simply seeking a chance at survival. Ko Hong softened and said, "In this world, who isn't struggling for that one slim chance?" Li Fan then said that Dao Xuanzi had once promised that if they succeeded, he would take their people away. Ko Hong let out a sigh and said that Dao Xuanzi had always been a man of his word for 100 years, yet who would have thought he actually had no bottom line and even deceived mortals. The absolute immortal formation was extremely dangerous. Even they struggled to leave, so how could they possibly take mortals out? Hearing this, Li Fan's heart trembled violently. After calming down for a moment, he said this was not a place to talk. He then brought Ko Hong to the underground chamber and asked whether the Immortal Master truly meant that mortals could not be taken out of this immortal sealed land. Ko Hong said he had no reason to deceive Li Fan, a mere mortal. Perhaps a golden core cultivator might be able to escort a mortal through the absolute immortal formation. Hearing this, Li Fan asked in disappointment, "Did mortals truly have no hope of leaving this world?" Ko Hong replied that to leave the immortal sealed land, one must break through the absolute immortal formation, something impossible for a mortal body. He added that Li Fan wouldn't live many more years anyway, so being a little local emperor here wasn't such a bad fate. Li Fan then asked if someone could cultivate to the same foundation establishment realm as Ko Hong, would they be able to leave? Ko Hong burst out laughing, saying it was impossible. There was no spiritual energy here at all, so one could not cultivate. Immortals were covered in miasma. How could they ever become immortals? He advised Li Fan to give up. A mortal wishing to cultivate must first go to the outside world, rebuild the body, and cleanse the miasma. Otherwise, even if the path to immortality lay before him, he could only see it but never touch it. Hearing this, Li Fan trembled all over in despair. After confirming once more that there was truly no solution, Li Fan stood up and walked out. The moment Li Fan stepped out of the chamber, the 2.5-meter thick stone door closed rapidly. Immediately after, immortal mortal miasma sprayed out from the walls, surrounding Ko Hong. Soon, only his screams echoed from behind the stone door. Since immortals and mortals could not coexist, how could Li Fan, a mere mortal, completely trust his words? Li Fan listened to Ko Hong's account. This place was the immortal sealed land, and everything began with a great calamity thousands of years ago in the ancient cultivation world. At first, cultivators did not take the mortal plague seriously, until one cultivator caught it, grew frighteningly stronger, and began spreading it among cultivators. It didn't take long before the plague spread across the entire cultivation world along spiritual energy, which cultivators relied upon. Those who caught it had their cultivation fall back, their realms collapse, or, at worst, lost all cultivation overnight, becoming no different from mortals before dying. In despair, cultivators vented their anger on mortals, carrying out mass slaughter for a period of time, though it was eventually stopped. For they discovered that when mortals died, the plague did not disappear. On the contrary, without restraint, it spread even more violently along spiritual energy, causing more cultivators to perish. But cultivators would never sit and wait for death, so a group of them began researching ways to resist and cure the plague. Another faction proposed a notorious Great Migration. Drive all mortals to outer worlds without spiritual energy or to broken pocket realms, then seal them off with formations forever. At first, the cultivation world had no mortals left, but not every cultivator's child possessed spiritual roots. Over time, new mortals were born again. These descendants could only cultivate after removing the miasma from their bodies. Gradually, this miasma became the symbol that separated immortals and mortals, and people named it the Immortal Mortal Miasma. After reading Ko Hong's confession, Li Fan's hands trembled uncontrollably. No one knew how many immortal sealed lands existed, and cultivators willing to risk their lives entering them were extremely rare. Meeting two of them had already been a miracle. As a mortal, Li Fan's lifespan was limited. Even if he could simulate reincarnation endlessly, it would still only repeat within the bounds of his natural life. This year, Li Fan was already 70 years old, and his biological limit was 86. The chance of meeting another cultivator within the remaining 16 years was almost zero. Yet he refused to accept living the same mortal life over and over. At that moment, he suddenly remembered something important. He hurried to the prison cell and asked Ko Hong how those mortals first arrived in the immortal sealed land. Seeing he still hadn't given up, Ko Hong asked back, "Even if you get out, what can you do? You're already over 70. Do you still wish to cultivate?" Li Fan replied that since Ko Hong had lost all his cultivation, could he still cultivate if he returned to the cultivation world? He then promised that if Ko Hong could help him find a way to reach the immortal realm, he would take him out together. Ko Hong cursed him, calling him a deceitful villain who shouldn't think of fooling him again. Li Fan said whether it was truth or lies, it was still a glimmer of hope. Did Ko Hong really want to spend the rest of his life in that cell? With no choice, Ko Hong admitted that back then they had used some kind of flying artifacts like flying boats or flying shuttles. In ancient times, the cultivation world had countless cultivators and flourishing sects, and such transportation artifacts were extremely common. Sadly, after the great change of heaven and earth, cultivators grew cautious and acted alone, so flying boats and flying shuttles became rare. Li Fan asked if this great change referred to the plague. Ko Hong said the immortal mortal miasma was strange, but it could not shake the foundation of cultivators. It only spread so widely because most cultivators perished in a great catastrophe. His words reminded Li Fan of what he once said while fighting Dao Xuanzi. On the Golden Core path, it's him or me. Though many methods for forming a Golden Core existed, far more cultivators were stuck at foundation establishment. So Li Fan asked whether that catastrophe was related to the idea that immortal techniques could no longer be cultivated together. Ko Hong said yes. Such restrictions did not exist in ancient times. Back then, great sects accepted disciples freely. Cultivators had their master's guidance and could seek advice whenever stuck. Fellow disciples practicing the same technique could even spar and exchange insights, making the cultivation world full of vitality. Until one day, cultivators realized their cultivation efficiency was dropping, and during practice they could sense how many people were cultivating the same technique. The more people practiced the same technique, the lower everyone's efficiency became. Countless cultivators found their cultivation unable to advance, and as their lifespan approached its end, the killing intent in their hearts could no longer be contained. Masters, disciples, and fellow sect members all turned into mortal enemies overnight, and a catastrophe that swept through the entire cultivation world began. As long as they practiced the same technique, it became a battle for the ancestral path. One side had to die. Even hiding deep in the mountains to cultivate secretly could not save anyone. For cultivators, practicing the same technique could sense each other's location. After hearing all this, Li Fan asked how cultivators practiced now and what the cultivation world currently looked like. Ko Hong said that nowadays, there are almost only two choices for those who wish to cultivate. The first was to join the 10,000 Immortals Alliance, a coalition of cultivators where one could exchange contribution points for techniques and resources. Contribution points were earned by completing assigned missions or by trading. The second was to join the 5 Elders Council, founded by 5 peak experts. Their influence was immense, and anyone with talent could join, at the cost of signing a sole contract and serving the council for a certain period. After hearing this, Li Fan asked if techniques didn't seem so scarce after all. Ko Hong told him that most of those techniques were incomplete. Even after being recompiled by major factions, they could only take a cultivator to the peak of Qi refining. To take another step and forge one's Dao foundation, one needed a higher tier technique. Techniques above foundation establishment, and especially those leading to the Golden Core realm, were almost mythical. Li Fan then asked, if one had to keep switching techniques, wouldn't each breakthrough require starting over with a new one? Ko Hong said all cultivators were required to cultivate the fragment of the Supreme Primordial Sutra, which was more like a secret art than a technique. Its purpose was to allow cultivators to dissolve their cultivation levels with minimal loss, enabling them to quickly catch up after scattering their cultivation and switching to a new technique. Hearing how miraculous it was, Li Fan couldn't help but marvel. Ko Hong sighed and said that even with such a sutra, true techniques were nearly impossible to obtain. What Dao Xuanzi never knew before his death was that the technique Ko Hong stole wasn't merely a core-forming method. It was a true technique pointing directly toward the nascent soul realm. Hearing this, Li Fan's heart trembled violently. Ko Hong then said he'd heard rumors that over the past several thousand years, some mortals from immortal sealed lands had secretly returned to the cultivation world. Li Fan said if such rumors existed, he would never give up even the slightest hope. Ko Hong scolded him, saying he didn't understand why an old man on the verge of the grave still caused trouble. Li Fan replied that if Ko Hong helped him find a way to return to the cultivation world, he would not only take him along, but also return everything that belonged to him in Dao Xuanzi. Hearing this, Ko Hong grew excited and asked if he truly meant it. At that moment, he resolved to do everything he could to help. In the days that followed, with Ko Hong's help, Li Fan gathered historical records from across the land, hoping to find clues about the Great Millennium Era from scattered ancient writings. At the same time, he mobilized the army to excavate ancient tombs on a large scale, hoping to uncover traces of the past. Though this stirred public resentment and officials submitted petitions daily, he forcibly suppressed all objections. Yet 16 years passed, and even as his lifespan approached its end, he still found nothing. His body could die at any moment now. Thus, before this life ended, he decided to check the items in his storage ring. First was the nascent soul level cultivation technique from Ko Hong. Unfortunately, as a mortal with no spiritual sense, he could not read it, like owning a treasure he could never enjoy. The ring also contained Dao Xuanzi's longsword. According to Ko Hong, after a cultivator dies, foundation-related artifacts lose their fortune energy. But at that moment, a system prompt suddenly appeared, making Li Fan's eyes light up. The panel displayed an option asking whether he wanted to charge the sword. Without hesitation, he selected yes. According to Reincarnation feedback, once anchor charging reached 100%, a second anchor point would unlock, allowing him to restart from any anchor. With that thought, he retrieved the items and activated the treasure reincarnation. As in previous cycles, 4 options appear before him. But this time, he chose to keep one item from the current simulation. The next second, all the treasures in his inventory were displayed. In the end, he chose the nascent soul technique. As soon as he made the choice, a bound item attribute appeared in his personal panel, meaning the technique would be permanently preserved within the reincarnation system. In his previous life, in order to find a way into the cultivation world, Li Fan's large-scale excavation of ancient tombs had been so shocking that even with his strong control over the court, it still stirred great opposition. But if he started planning from the very beginning in this life, he might change the thoughts of the entire world. With his subtle manipulation, many events shifted slightly. In Anchor Year 5, the archaic school suddenly rose to fame, bringing several ancient scrolls to the capital. Their brilliance astonished the world. In Anchor Year 6, the emperor suddenly fell gravely ill, bedridden, and beyond the physician's help. The archaic school then presented a pill in audience. After the emperor took it, he recovered within a few days. In Anchor Year 11, Jianghuai Prefecture cracked a major tomb robbing case, arresting over 100 people. Prefect Li Fan dared not decide on his own, so he sent an urgent 800-mile memorial to Xianjing for imperial judgment. A month later, the edict arrived, no death sentence, only enslavement in the capital. In Anchor Year 15, the emperor grew terminally ill and sought an immortal pill. He mobilized over 100,000 soldiers to search ancient tombs. No pill was found. He died regretfully, and the nationwide tomb-seeking frenzy intensified. Before dying, the emperor passed the throne to the Prince of Langia. Once again, Li Fan controlled the world from the shadows. In Anchor Year 23, as countless tombs were excavated, lost history was gradually restored. The earliest traceable dynasty was called Qi. Li Fan then offered a grand bounty. Anyone who found a Qi dynasty tomb would be granted a marquisate. In Anchor Year 25, the tomb of Qi's first emperor, Isingji, was finally located. Li Fan immediately ordered the passage to be opened. The main passage extended for hundreds of meters, its walls filled with vivid murals still clear after millennia. Upon reaching the main chamber, they found a vast space 40 to 50 meters high and several kilometers wide. The ceiling mimicked the stars, inlaid with countless luminous pearls, with mountain peaks rising amidst a sea of clouds. This sea of clouds, strangely, remained fixed within the chamber, never drifting, never dissipating for thousands of years. Invisible bridges connected the mountain peaks. After reaching the highest summit, they saw a simple thatched hut. Upon closer inspection, the straw was woven from gold thread. Li Fan ordered his men to open the door first. After confirming no danger, he entered. The sight inside shocked him. In the center stood a memorial tablet inscribed, "Outer Disciple Yi Xingji of Taiyin Sect." It seemed the man had joined a sect called Taiyin, but remained an outer disciple until death, never stepping onto the immortal path, eventually exiled here by cultivators. Even in death, he longed for his sect, so the tablet bore not the title of emperor, but outer disciple of Taiyin Sect. Yi Xingji was likely entrusted by Taiyin cultivators to oversee the great migration of this realm. Li Fan continued searching the main burial chamber, and after finding no flying vessel or similar artifacts, he returned to the palace. A few days later, news arrived that a record mentioning a flying vessel had been found among the burial inventory. However, the tomb had already been robbed, and judging from the damage, the theft occurred 1,000 years ago. Hearing this, Li Fan slammed the table and overturned it in anger. He couldn't accept having hope shown to him only to be crushed immediately afterward. After venting his fury, he issued a decree. Anyone who found a clue related to a mortal state would be granted the title of Thousand Household Marquis. In Anchor Year 35, news finally arrived. An immortal's tomb had been discovered. Scouts reported that days earlier, while a group was digging an inconspicuous tomb, they were injured by a strange force released from within. Li Fan immediately ordered them to bring immortal miasma and proceed to open the tomb. Under his lead, they splashed fresh blood onto the barrier. The seemingly indestructible shield turned to ash the moment it touched the blood. Shortly after they entered, someone reported finding an object resembling a flying vessel. Upon hearing this, Li Fan rushed there without delay. Looking at the item, he asked in shock, "Is this supposed to be a flying vessel? It's smaller than my shoe." But through a message carved on the tomb wall before the owner's death, he finally understood the entire story. The tomb owner was named Qian Hong, a Foundation establishment cultivator. Over 3,000 years ago, pursued by enemies, he fled into the immortal sealed land with nowhere else to go. But the immortal sealed land had no spiritual energy, and with only a few spirit stones on him, he soon exhausted them. Without spirit stones to replenish his energy, his cultivation declined rapidly. He guessed that the mortals banished here 1,000 years earlier might have left behind a few flying vessels. Thus he searched everywhere, spending decades before finally finding Yi Xingji's tomb. Although there was indeed a flying vessel in the tomb, the power core formation carved within the stone tablet had already been destroyed, and Qian Hong was not skilled in artifact crafting. Thus, Qian Hong finally gave up the idea of ever leaving the immortal sealed land. Li Fan then lowered his gaze to the stone tablet once more. The system prompted, "This is a worldly oddity, halt-stepping fragment tablet." When he placed his hand on it, the treasure reincarnation showed no response. He guessed it had been corroded by the immortal miasma and turned into an ordinary stone. He then picked up the remaining items Qian Hong left behind. One was a chi training technique called Lesser True Return Art, which displayed one current practitioner. The other, Cloudwater Record, a foundation-level technique, also displayed one practitioner. Seeing that someone was still cultivating these techniques, he instinctively thought it was a trap. But after thinking it through, he felt something was wrong. Over 3,000 years had passed. Even Golden Core cultivators would have long turned to dust. Suddenly, he guessed, could these techniques have original archives? After the Great Calamity, many techniques were rewritten by the 10,000 Immortals Alliance and the 5 Elders Council. Naturally, their earliest versions must exist. The major factions would re-release unpracticed techniques whenever someone exchanged for them. Over 3,000 years, who knew how many owners these two techniques had cycled through? And the final item was the flying vessel he had dreamed about. Although damaged, it didn't matter. Qian Hong couldn't repair it, nor could Li Fan, but someone in the future would. So he waited another 15 years, until the day Ko Hong and Dao Xuanzi arrived above the capital. This time, before they could begin fighting, he interrupted, questioning why they would battle to the death over a mere Golden Core technique. The two were first shocked, then called him arrogant. Showing no fear, Li Fan made a gesture inviting them to come down and talk. Curious about his intentions, The two paused their fight and sat down with him. Li Fan said that his ancestor had left a prophecy before dying. Two immortals would descend from the void abyss, and that would be their clan's only chance to escape this land. For millennia, his clan had doubted it, but today it was finally confirmed. Ko Hong asked, "How should we address you?" Li Fan stated his name. Dao Xuanzi then asked, "What do you mean by a chance to escape this land?" Li Fan's expression stiffened as he countered, "Do you not believe me?" Ko Hong replied, "We've roamed the immortal realm for centuries, yet never heard of any divination that can predict something 1,000 years ahead." Li Fan stepped forward and asked if they had heard of the Taiyin sect. Ko Hong reacted instantly, excited. Could it be the ancient sect famed for its divination arts? Seeing that reaction, Li Fan finally eased his breath. He then said he was a disciple of the Taiyin sect. He continued, "Although my ancestor joined the Taiyin sect, he disliked cultivation and was obsessed only with divination. When a world changed and mortals had to be relocated to other realms. With only a cheer of finding beginner's cultivation, his ancestor would not have been forced if he had refused. Yet seeing his clan panic, he volunteered to oversee the migration of mortals and stayed in this place thereafter." Hearing this, Dao Xuanzi asked, "I see. Then for what reason did you stop my brother and me?" Li Fan replied, "First, because the two of you are the key for my people to leave this land. Second, watching you fight to the death over a single foundation-establishing technique feels unnecessary." Dao Xuanzi said, "You may not know this, but techniques in the outside world are extremely rare now. Killing for one is normal." Li Fan then said, "My ancestor left behind a golden core level technique before his death." Hearing this, Ko Hong immediately turned excited and said to Dao Xuanzi, "That's great. Then we don't have to fight anymore." Dao Xuanzi then asked Li Fan what kind of help he wanted from them. Li Fan said, "My ancestor's dying wish was for our clan to return to the Taiyin sect. Before passing, he left not only that technique, but also a damaged artifact, the Taiyin boat. He also used the Taiyin divination arts to foresee that two cultivators would one day arrive here, one adept with the sword, the other fond of crafting, capable of repairing the Taiyin boat and helping us escape this sealed land." The two cultivators heard this and believed him even more, marveling at the profundity of the divination arts. Li Fan then said he would show them the technique to prove his words. Dao Xuanzi noticed Ko Hong also wanted to follow and coldly asked, "You already got a foundation-establishing technique. Isn't that enough?" Ko Hong's heart trembled. He quickly backed away and said he would not go. Seeing this, Li Fan allowed a faint, knowing smile to appear. When Li Fan brought Dao Xuanzi to the secret chamber, the latter stopped at the entrance. He could clearly sense the deadly immortal mortal miasma inside. Li Fan said, "We mortals must protect our ancestral treasure somehow. Caution is necessary." He then took out a technique from the chamber, the very one he obtained from Ko Hong in the previous cycle. Dao Xuanzi saw it was a nascent soul technique, and his entire body involuntarily trembled. From his reaction, Li Fan knew he had no idea Ko Hong had possessed such a thing. Li Fan explained, "Because Ko Hong was here earlier, I only said it was a foundation-establishing technique, lest he develop malicious thoughts." Dao Xuanzi cupped his hands and thanked him, promising he would ensure Ko Hong repaired the Taiyin boat. Li Fan laughed and replied, "If the boat can truly be repaired, I will offer this technique with both hands." When they returned to the main hall, Dao Xuanzi told Ko Hong that Li Fan truly had a foundation-establishing technique. Ko Hong immediately said, "Then just rob him. No matter how many mortals there are, they cannot stop the two of us." Dao Xuanzi replied, "He is a descendant of the Taiyin sect. You saw that terrifying divination technique earlier. He may have other means." He advised Ko Hong that repairing the Taiyin boat was all that was needed. In truth, Dao Xuanzi feared that Li Fan might reveal the truth, that it was a nascent soul technique. Though the boat looked small, it still took Ko Hong and Dao Xuanzi a full year to restore. After handing it to Li Fan, Ko Hong said, "The core array, size shift array, and concealment array are all repaired. But without proper materials, The defensive and offensive arrays were only restored at the most basic level. It can pass the absolute immortal formation, but fighting other cultivators will be difficult. Holding the tie-in boat, Li Fan said with excitement, "It's enough. As long as I return to the immortal realm, my ancestors' token will guide me back to the tie-in sect." Ko Hong explained, "The tie-in boat has 3 forms, powered by spiritual energy and controlled with divine sense. The smallest form is 10 meters long. The second form reaches 100 meters. The largest spans over 1,000. He added that their spirit stones were limited. They could fuel the second form, but controlling the boat required at least 7th layer chi-refining divine sense. And he asked proudly if Li Fan needed his help. Before he finished, Li Fan formed a hand seal and expanded the boat to 100 meters in an instant. Ko Hong was stunned. Truly remarkable. A mere mortal can control the tie-in boat so easily. Li Fan replied calmly, "A small trick. Nothing worth mentioning." He then signaled Dao Xuanzi to follow him to retrieve the technique. A few days later, both cultivators prepared to leave, fearing further decline in their cultivation due to lack of spirit stones. Ko Hong said, "If you manage to escape, come find me in Lingtian City in the Tsongyan Mountains." He handed Li Fan a scroll, a map of the exit of the absolute immortal formation. After a few polite words, the two turned into streaks of light and vanished. Mid-flight, Ko Hong said, "Li Fan is sharp, but his lifespan is nearly over. Even if he returns, he won't live long." Dao Xuanzi replied, "Without longevity, everything is empty. You and I fight for that sliver of life, do we not?" Ko Hong then asked, "What technique did you get?" Dao Xuanzi smiled. "It can't be the same as yours, right?" He said he would keep his promise after breaking through to Golden Core. As they spoke, they arrived above the absolute immortal formation. Dao Xuanzi said, "The mist hasn't cleared. Do you dare go first?" Ko Hong laughed. "Why wouldn't I?" He formed a seal and dove downward. Soon after they left, Li Fan arrived piloting the tie-in boat. At 71 years old, Li Fan knew he could not wait 14 more years for the next fog to clear. With nothing left to hold him back, he decided to explore the absolute immortal formation that very day. With that thought, he accelerated the tie-in boat and dove downward. Beneath the void abyss, thick white fog covered everything, making the world feel unreal. Soon, the tie-in boat shook violently as if it had struck something. He judged that this must be the gale layer Ko Hong had mentioned. Wind strong enough to tear a mortal apart, and even Foundation establishment cultivators needed shields to survive it. After half an hour of careful maneuvering, he broke through the gale layer. The shaking eased, and endless light filled the front. For a moment, he felt as though he had escaped the formation, entered the immortal world, obtained a rare technique, and reached the Golden Core realm in just a century. His path remained smooth, and 1,000 years later, he ascended to the immortal realm. Step by step, he cultivated immortal power and eventually became an immortal emperor. He then shattered the immortal realm's barrier and ascended to the god realm. Starting as a miner, he cultivated for tens of thousands of years and reached the God King realm, becoming its strongest being. Later, he ascended to the primordial god realm, only to become a mere gatekeeper. At that moment, he suddenly woke up. It had all been a dream. The tie-in boat had flipped upside down. Based on Ko Hong's map, he had already left the illusory light layer and reached the 3rd layer, the inversion layer. The tie-in boat must have sailed out of the illusion on its own, waking him. He realized that if the boat could navigate through illusions automatically, perhaps he only needed to supply power while it handled direction. A faint intuition came from the tie-in boat, guiding him where to go, and he accelerated accordingly. Following that guidance, he passed the 4th layer, the fire flow layer. Then came the 5th layer, the cold ice layer. After that was the 6th, the thunderstorm layer. Beyond the thunderstorm layer lay the darkness layer. According to Ko Hong, this layer held no danger, just endless darkness. His emotions surged. After 6 lifetimes and hundreds of years, he was finally about to leave this place. But the next second, a giant blood-red maw lunged toward the Taiyin boat. In panic, he activated the artifact and ended that life cycle. He had not seen what the creature was, but Ko Hong and Dao Xuanzi had never mentioned anything like it. Though he failed in the end, the gains of that life far exceeded expectations. After preserving the Taiyin boat, he began his 7th reincarnation. In the 4th anchor year, he led trusted aides to Qian Hong's tomb and used a spray infused with mortal immortal miasma to slowly erode the residual power of the stone tablet. This way, the tablet would not be destroyed, allowing him to charge it. After 15 more years, when the fog dispersed again, he piloted the Taiyin boat into the formation once more, quickly passing the earlier layers and entering the darkness layer. This time, he searched for a long while and saw no creature. With the exit in sight, he accelerated. But before long, the giant maw appeared again. He confirmed his suspicion. The creature only attacked mortals. Perhaps its purpose was to devour all mortals who approached. With no choice, he turned upward to flee. The creature continued chasing him. Only when he reached the thunderstorm layer did it stop. Looking back, he finally saw its full form and broke into a cold sweat. It was a colossal whale. His dozens of meters long Taiyin boat was not even the size of one of its teeth. Yet the giant whale could locate him every time. For the next 15 years, he attempted to break through the darkness layer again and again. But each time, the whale found him faster, forcing him to retreat after a short struggle. By the 35th anchor year, he discovered that only on the day the white fog receded did the whale seem delayed, giving him a small window to reach the bottom of the abyss. This time, he resolved to risk everything, charging at full speed. But just as he saw the light of the exit, the whale attacked again. Having gone too deep to dodge, he ended that life through reincarnation and continued charging the Taiyin boat. In his 8th life, during the 4th anchor year, he opened Qian Hong's tomb once again. In the 5th anchor year, the white fog scattered. The energy progress of the solar void charge had reached nearly 90%, but since it wasn't full yet, he could only wait patiently. In the 20th anchor year, his attempt failed again. In the 35th anchor year, he failed once more. Still, those attempts were not meaningless. At the very least, his control of the Taiyin boat grew more refined. In the 50th anchor year, he chose not to force his way into the darkness layer again. He was already old, his reactions and spirit greatly weakened, and success was impossible. So he decided to visit 2 old friends to see if they knew anything useful. As before, he used his golden core technique to trick Ko Hong and Dao Xuanzi into coming to the Grand Tutor's manor. Then he handed them the whale sketch he drew. Ko Hong looked at it and frowned, saying he had never encountered such a creature when crossing the darkness layer.
Dao Xuanzi, however, seemed to notice something. He said he had once seen records in an ancient text. In ancient times, there was a sect called the beast-taming sect. They possessed no profound techniques but could command mythical beasts through a single beast-taming art. Among the most famous beasts they controlled was a giant whale resembling this one. Hearing this, Ko Hong suddenly recalled that this giant whale was called a realm-splitting whale. Hearing a clue, he excitedly asked whether there was a way to avoid these whales. But both of them said such beasts had vanished from the cultivation world for thousands of years. They had never seen one, much less knew how to handle it. He sighed, realizing he still had to rely on himself. After handing the technique to Dao Xuanzi, he activated reincarnation and ended that life. In his 9th life, he opened Qian Hong's tomb again to absorb the steel of halted steps, but reincarnation gave no response. In the 20th, 35th, and 50th anchor years, he tried repeatedly but still could not break through the darkness layer. By the 65th anchor year, he was 85 years old and nearly at his limit. This time, he did not force anything. He simply released control of the Taiyin boat and let it drift downward at a steady speed. But this time, the realm-splitting whale, which should have appeared, never showed up. He soon reached the area near the exit. Seeing this, he stood up trembling. Then he pushed the Taiyin boat to full speed toward the very bottom exit. But the moment he accelerated, the whale appeared again. Only then did he suddenly realize the realm-splitting whale could not see, or simply ignored, objects moving at a constant speed. As long as he kept the same speed, he could safely pass through the absolute immortal formation. Realizing this, he burst into laughter. No matter how fast the whale was, he had already reached the exit. Amid his wild laughter and the whale's roar, the Taiyan boat broke through the rift between the two realms, rushing toward the cultivation world. Soon the surroundings blurred, as though he crossed countless worlds in an instant. Under the crushing pressure, blood poured from his nose and eyes, but he didn't care. Looking back at the absolute immortal formation, his viewpoint was lifted endlessly, and in that moment, he saw a sight he would never forget. The entire body of the realm-splitting whale was fully visible, and it was not alone. As his vision expanded farther and farther, he saw thousands upon thousands of such whales. They swam freely through countless dark spaces floating in the void. And the place he came from, the absolute immortal region, drifted farther and farther away from the cultivation world. In this life, he finally broke out of that forbidden region. And at last, he saw the cultivation world he had dreamed of for so long. To witness this sight before dying, this life had not been lived in vain. So, before taking his final breath, he activated the reincarnation artifact. After 9 lives and nearly 500 years, he finally reached the threshold of cultivation. According to his original plan, he intended to boost the charging speed. But when he saw the selection list, he hesitated. The steel of halted steps was among the options again. After thinking carefully, he chose to keep it. He wanted to verify the guess in his heart. Since he did not choose accelerated charging, he would have to wait 20 years for the cycle to finish. In the 3rd anchor year, he returned to Qian Hong's tomb. This time, he didn't use the mortal-immortal miasma. Instead, he directly took out the steel of halted steps. The moment he did, the steel in his hand began to fade, while the steel inside the tomb formed a much stronger array. This confirmed his theory. Extraordinary relics in this world are unique. There cannot be 2 identical ones. By using reincarnation, he had created a duplicate, and the outcome was inevitable. The 2 merged into 1. He then ordered his men to erode the tomb's formation using the mortal-immortal miasma spray. It took great effort to weaken it enough to enter. Inside, the steel looked only slightly less damaged than before. Yet reincarnation still could not absorb it. Clearly, it required even further restoration. He stored the enhanced steel inside the Taiyan boat as future supplies for his journey to the cultivation world. By the 20th anchor year, the cycle was nearly charged. He executed a group of corrupt officials and tyrannical landlords, taking all the wealth their families had accumulated for generations. Since he would still need to interact with mortals after entering the cultivation world, wealth was essential. Food was even more important. Grain was the foundation of any nation. And because he demanded so much, officials protested intensely. He didn't bother explaining. In front of the entire court, he expanded the Taiyan boat to its largest form, floating above the imperial palace. Commoners knelt and bowed in awe, and the officials, seeing such divine means, instantly changed their attitudes and volunteered to help gather grain. With the officials' cooperation and after removing another batch of dishonest merchants, the Taiyan boat was finally filled to the brim. With all worldly ties resolved, he piloted the Taiyan boat back to the void abyss. After several hours, he once again broke through the absolute immortal region. But this time, what greeted him was an endless ocean. He was stunned. The last time he emerged, he had clearly seen towering mountains. He opened Ko Hong's map, but there was no trace of any ocean. Helpless, he could only proceed step by step and hope he found civilization before the boat's spiritual power ran dry. He picked a direction and flew across the vast sea, searching for any sign of human habitation. But after flying for 7 days and nights, he found nothing. Another dozen days passed. The Taiyan boat slowed, clearly running low on power. Just as all hope seemed gone, he finally spotted the faint silhouette of a ship on the distant sea. When he raised the telescope to his eyes, he realized it was a ship on the verge of sinking, clearly attacked by something. One man shouted for everyone not to panic, saying he had already signaled an immortal master. Hearing the words immortal master, his heart jolted. He quickly put away the Taiyan boat and swam up from underwater to join the survivors. Then he pretended to be half dead and cried out for help along with the others, begging the immortal master to save them. Before long, a figure appeared in the sky. The man seemed to use some sort of spell, making it impossible for them to see his face. The moment he arrived, everyone around them was rendered completely silent. With a slight lift of his finger, the massive ship, over 100 meters long, slowly righted itself before the stunned onlookers. Then the vessel rose from the water, and the gaping hole in its hull healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. With one final sweep of his hand, all the people who had fallen into the sea were tossed back onto the deck. After finishing his work, the immortal master hovered above the ship and asked who had sent the signal. A man immediately stepped forward, knelt, and said, "This humble one is Su Chongyu." The immortal master asked if everyone understood the rules. Once they reached their destination, everything had nothing to do with him. He had never seen them and did not know who they were. Was that clear? Su Chongyu hurriedly replied that he understood. Satisfied with the answer, the immortal master waved his hand again, and the ship sped off in a certain direction. For the rest of the journey, he stood silently at the bow, and the people on board fell into an eerie silence as well. After most of the day had passed and night had fallen, they finally saw scattered lights ahead, a seemingly prosperous island, with hundreds of large ships docked at its harbor. But their ship did not head to the harbor. Instead, it circled halfway around the island and stopped at a secluded natural cave on the far side. Once they dropped anchor, several burly men in black came forward to receive them. These men acted as if they could not see the immortal master at all, focusing only on driving the passengers off the ship. They led everyone into a large hall and told them they would rest there for the night. Food was already prepared inside, and they could help themselves. Tomorrow, someone would come to process their new identities. With that, the black-clothed men turned and left. After they were gone, one man complained about their bad luck. Attacked by a sea monster, they had set out with nearly 100 people, yet less than half survived. Another grumbled that he could not understand why his father insisted on sending him here to cultivate. Life had been much more comfortable at home. The first man added that, back home, he was at least the son of the southern warden king, surrounded by endless wealth and glory. Su Chongyu stepped forward and said that such talk was pointless now. Every family had paid a tremendous price to get them here. Instead of complaining, he urged them to cultivate patiently. If they truly became immortal masters one day, not only would they gain a chance at longevity, they might even return to their homelands and bring their clans out as well. Listening to their conversation, he easily guessed that these people, like him, came from some absolute immortal region. The difference was that, in their region, the existence of the cultivation world did not seem to be a secret, and judging from today's events, a mature smuggling route had already formed. Just as he was lost in thought, someone suddenly patted his shoulder. The man said he found him familiar and asked what official rank he held in Dali, or whether he was a rich merchant or noble lord from some prefecture.
Guys, that's the end of the video. If you liked this video, please leave a comment in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Like the video and share it too. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.